So today for tip time, we're going to get into one of the most valuable cross-stepping tips I could give. How many steps you should take and why. This came from a brilliant question asked from our viewer Emily Surfs, who asked for any tips on how many steps one should take when heading to the nose. This is tip time, now let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another segment of Tip Time where we take a deep dive into your questions. Today we're going to cover through some really important stuff. We're going to walk through the common problems that we face, why we consider shuffling and why we get caught in shuffling when we're stepping to the nose, how many steps you should be taking to the nose and why, as well as how to practice this and make sure it translates well into your own surfing. I'm also going to be going through some real-time examples at the end, looking at how I'm cross-stepping and the methods I'm using and how to go about this, so stay tuned for that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the common problems. And the first thing I did want to bring up here, and it might seem sort of obvious, but it's actually identifying where the problem is with your cross-stepping. What's actually happening that's detracting from where you want to be or the approach that you want to be taking. This can be a number of things. Maybe it's falling short. We're not starting at the right position. So we'll step through this as the video goes along, but it's really important that you have a good understanding of what's happening so that we know what to fix. But the second thing is we're not making it repeatable. And by this, I mean we're not using the same approach each time. A lot of the time we'll get stuck thinking we want to cross-step 4 steps, but then we end up cross-stepping 2 steps. We end up using a bit of a shuffle and we don't start in the same position. So all of these elements and factors make it really difficult to practice because we're not doing something consistent, and we know that consistency is the key to success with this sort of stuff. And the other common problem that I see is that we're actually missing the nose. So this will look like we're doing our steps to the nose and we're not quite getting there. Now there's a few reasons as to why this happens, and there's a few things that we can do to fix it. We'll step through that in the following points. So why do we get caught shuffling? So shuffling is that number one thing that as longboarders, most of us want to get rid of. Cross-stepping is a really nice, beautiful way to, I guess, move along the board, and it's nice and fluid and looks very stylish as well. So we want to get to the cross-stepping, but why do we shuffle? Firstly, shuffling is our natural position that we feel very solid in. If you're thinking about the base position that a surfer comes into, it's into that natural stance or that goofy stance, but essentially one foot in front of the other. As soon as we come into this cross-step position, we feel very off balance and off-centered, and we want to get out of this as quickly as possible. The easiest thing to do for this is just to not cross-step at all, which becomes a problem because then we don't get that really nice flowing cross-step to the nose. And so then we just stay shuffling. Now we need to try and reverse this or kind of fight through this barrier so that we can get to our cross-stepping. And the way to do this is firstly to learn to cross-step effectively. This includes some land practice, and this includes making sure that when we're on the wave, we feel stable in that cross-step position. So not just thinking of a cross-step as a way to move forwards, but being comfortable standing and trimming in a cross-step position. That's the number one thing to do there. So how many steps should we be taking to the nose? I like to break this down into the beginner and the advanced approach. For the beginner approach, I'm going to say that 4 steps is a must. I say this because I see too many times we get caught into a big problem of cross-stepping or trying to cross-step twice and get to the nose, but this is where we're often missing the nose and coming with a lot of our problems. And in this beginner phase as well, it's likely that we're just getting started with cross-stepping or just within the first kind of few months of our cross-stepping, and we might not be super balanced with it yet, and we might be rushing and a little bit off balance, and so it does perpetuate a lot of these problems. The reason I say the 4 cross steps is really important is because you can take the first 2 steps, gauge where you are on the board, get your balance, and then take a more precise and considered following 2 steps to make sure we're landing on the nose properly and not falling short or not getting caught too far forwards either. So it's really important in the beginning phases to do 4 steps. For our advanced options, we do have the 4 steps or the 2 steps. I say the 4 steps is something you'd be considering when you have time. So if you've got a slower approach to the nose, we can take your 4 steps. I also think that this looks really good, and personally I think it has that nice stylish element to it. You even see sometimes people taking 6 steps to the nose and doing that nice fast footwork, and I think that's a beautiful traditional element that we should try and encourage. But sometimes we need to get to the nose quickly, and we need to get to the nose fast, and this is where we might take 2 steps to the nose. The reason this is in the advanced category is because this is where a lot of our problems can arise. And if you don't have those steps absolutely perfect, you're going to miss. And sometimes I've been a culprit of actually missing the nose. The front foot lands too far forwards and I miss and I fall, which isn't good. But essentially what you want to make sure you can do is take 2 really big steps, and it is almost a jump or a skip. If you're coming from the center of the board, this is another time when you can do the 2 steps a little bit more reliably, so you won't need to jump forward so much, but it might be coming off a really fast trimming section, getting through a fast section, and you've actually positioned yourself in the middle of the board in order to go fast, so you're in the sweet spot. So if you're in the middle of the board already, you probably won't need to fit in your 4 steps. It's probably not plausible. You can just take those 2 steps easily to the nose. But if we're starting from the tail, then the 4 steps is going to be more likely, unless we're really rushing and we know that we can, take those steps really perfectly. So the big takeaways that I would like you to have from this are that if you are beginning or in that intermediate stage, using that 4-step process from the start and as your first method of getting to the nose is really important, because there are a lot of problems that can come into place if we start with 2. From there, as you're getting more and more comfortable with it, practicing your 4 quicker steps to the nose, especially when there's a slow section or when you're stepping from the tail, is really important. And then the 2 steps can come in both when you're trying to get to the nose super quickly from the tail, but again, this is going to be a bigger jump. And then when you're stepping from the middle of the board, say if you've been gaining some speed and accelerating from the midpoint as well. So I hope that's helpful. Let's step into a couple of examples now. Okay, so the first example we're going to use here is the 4 slow steps to the nose, coming from the tail all the way through to the nose ride. Now you can see with this example, I'm starting at the tail, and so already that would be my trigger to say we're probably going to do 4 steps unless we're going for a big jump to the nose in a really critical fast section, because we've got to make that nose ride happen now. You can see with this method that I land about mid-board or maybe a little bit in front of the midpoint of the board after the first 2 steps. I can wait, consider my options, see what the section's doing and see where my next 2 steps need to be placed, and then I can continue. So the slow approach and taking 4 steps is really good in a situation like this, and really good again for our beginner to intermediate approach. The second approach here is the 4 quick steps to the nose. So similar to the previous wave, we see that I'm starting from the tail, and so it is going to be more likely that we're taking the 4-step approach. The reason I took the 4-step approach and not the 2-step approach was because I felt like I didn't have a lot of speed, and oftentimes taking the 2 steps can wobble the board because there's a lot of force being placed through the board as you jump forwards. So that's why I tried to do the 4 steps here to keep everything nice and smooth and trimming in line. And then lastly, we have the approach taking 2 steps to the nose. Now with this one here, I was trying to gain speed before I approached the nose, and so I came from the midpoint of the board. This is that perfect example where as I'm coming from the midpoint, there's no use doing 4 steps because I'm already halfway up. I don't need that step to take me from the tail to the midpoint. I can just go straight to the nose. So from here, you can see those nice 2 steps to the nose, placing me on the hang 10 and in the right position. So this is something that, again, you can consider later down the track once you feel very comfortable with your 4-step approach. And the 2-step approach can be even more advanced if we are taking those 2 steps just from the tail, because again, we're going to have to jump forwards and those steps are going to be much larger. Okay, I hope that was really helpful. If you have any questions on anything we covered today, please make sure you leave them in the comments below and I'd be happy to have a chat about it. It's always an interesting dive into cross-stepping. There's so many different elements, considerations, but we'll leave it there this week. Again, we've got the Sunday Glide coming up this Sunday and another segment of Tip Time coming up in a week's time. But until then, hope you guys are getting waves. We'll catch you on the next one. Yep.